there, it's Renessa Boley Lane, and I want to welcome you to another conversation on creating your perfect work. If you follow my work, then you know that I am all about equipping you to discover, design, and get highly paid doing work you love, whether that means radically changing careers, launching a business, or bringing a big idea to life. So we're in the middle of a 7-day series on how to create the time, space, and focus you need to get highly paid doing work that you love. And so one new belief that you get to embrace today is that working harder will not create more time for you, right? That's why today's conversation is all about being and less about doing. And we're going to talk about up-leveling your leadership. And so before you start thinking, I'm not a leader, this doesn't apply to me, I might not be managing, it doesn't matter whether you have leadership in your title, whether you're supervising folks or not. If you're in a career, you're a leader. If you are in business, doing the side hustle, getting things off the ground, you're a leader. If you are a mom and you have a household with a spouse and some kids and other folks that you are responsible for, you're a leader. And so up-leveling that is going to make a huge difference in the amount of time, space, and focus you're able to create to really bring the big dreams to life. And if for some reason you don't see yourself as a leader, that's the clearest signal that this conversation is for you. And so, it's funny because it took me a long time to realize that it was my leadership, both personally and professionally, that influenced the level of overwhelm and the level of busyness that I experienced as I was building my perfect work. And so we're talking about some of the hidden secrets that when you master that, it's going to make a huge difference in how much breathing room you give yourself, how much flow, how much ease, how much impact, how much influence you have. So this brilliant leader that is sharing the screen with me is none other than Carla Miller. Carla is a leadership coach, and she's on a mission to empower over 10,000 women in their careers. So she's been featured in national media such as The Guardian and Psychology's magazine, and she regularly chairs conference panels for leadership. She hosts a chart-topping podcast, so pay attention to this. This is a writer-downer. It's called Influence and Impact for Female Leaders, and she is the author of the upcoming book, The Influence Gap, a handbook for women leaders, which will be published in September 2022, this year. So she's got the goods, she's got the creds. But here's what I love about Carla's work. She doesn't just talk theory. Like, Carla talks humanity. And she understands and she validates how you think, how you feel, the struggles that are so common to female leaders at all levels. And more importantly, she's brilliant at the how-tos, like what to say, what not to say, how to position and frame your next steps as you navigate through organizational dynamics. And she's really, really good at that. And so this is someone I highly endorse that you follow, because she's got some good stuff to help you get where you need to go. But with that said, I want to welcome you, Carla, to the show. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your time and sharing your expertise.
Thank you. I think that's the best introduction I've ever had. Can I have you to be my hype person?
Yes. I can be a hype woman. But no, it's genuinely true. Like I take the time to, as much as I can anyways, to get to know people's content, because who I connect with, it's important that A, you're a force for good, but two, that there's quality in what you bring. And the thing that just really struck me was the level of humanity that you brought to leadership. And sometimes we think that as leaders, we have to lose that humanity. We've got to get colder, we've got to get harder. And I think you just have that really perfect blend. And it's something that women need to hear. And I mean that sincerely. So let's talk about you. So your leadership journey, we're talking about leadership here. Your leadership journey has definitely not been a smooth one. And so tell us how your leadership evolved.
Well, I think when I first started managing, what I wanted to do was do the exact opposite to the bad managers that I'd had. And I'd had managers, this was a long time ago, I'm 47, so we're going back a few years. And I'd had managers who didn't give me credit for my work, they weren't kind, I used to get very upset at work, and they just wanted to keep me in my box and wouldn't let me grow. And so I was like, right, so a good manager basically is super nice all the time. And that was my intention. So I hired my first person, I'd been promoted, and I was so nice to this person. But as a result, when she wasn't doing what she was supposed to be doing, and I let her know that, she didn't take me seriously. And in fact, I ended up having to fire her in the end. And that was on me, because I had not done something we're going to talk about later, stepped into the authority that came with my role. And so I quickly realized that actually it wasn't all about being super nice. You've got to be a good person, obviously. And then later, I had more opportunities to be promoted. I took what I call radical responsibility, which is the sound okay, by the way?
Yeah, sounds fine.
Okay, great. I took radical responsibility, which means when I saw problems around me, I tried to solve them, and I raised them and said, how can we make this happen? As a result, I ended up getting promoted above my peers, and a lot of them were 10 years older than me, not very happy about the fact that they probably had 10 years more experience as well. And suddenly I was their line manager. So again, that was quite challenging, because like you said, I didn't see myself as a leader. I just wanted to be a force for good. I just wanted to improve things and make things better for my team so we could do our job well. And then later I went for my first director level role. I was 29 years old, and the team that I was going to be line managing interviewed me. And they decided that I shouldn't get the job because I was too young. I wasn't told this until someone else had given me the job, and I started. And I would go in the morning and say, morning, and they would look up from their desks, just look at me and put their heads down again. So I quickly had to build credibility. Luckily, I had lots of tools to do that, and I ended up with a fantastic team. And some of those people ended up becoming very good friends of mine. But I learned that I needed to work on myself and work on some of the baggage that I was bringing to leadership. But also I needed to learn how to influence and how to have credibility and how to make more impact. And once I had mastered those, my career took off. I went on to become director of a number of different charities, chief exec. And when I moved into the recruitment world for a couple of years, within a year, I was managing director of the company, managing the very people who had taught me recruitment. But by then I'd stepped into my way of leading, which was not, I have to have all the answers and be perfect. It was, right, I'm going to coordinate this. We're going to collaborate. I'll use my strengths, so you use yours. So that was my journey. I don't think anyone has a smooth journey to leadership, though, do they? We learn through the things we do wrong. And I think that's what I try and do now, is shortcut that for other people so that they can learn my lessons and realize you don't have to be perfect to be an inspiring leader. And in fact, sometimes our imperfections are what draw people to us, that humanity that you talked about.
I completely agree with you. It's interesting. And for those of you who are listening in, I want you to stay in, because for those of you who are managers, you are hearing this conversation. You're like, I totally get it. I totally get it. I'm managing people. I understand the dynamics. For those of you who might be individual contributors and you might not have any aspirations about leading in an organization, there might be this tendency to check out. Don't check out, because this has applicability across every area of your life. Every area of your life. If you are an entrepreneur, if you're a budding entrepreneur, if you have this idea of stepping into entrepreneurship, there's going to be so many points here that we land for you that are going to be critical. So I want to make sure that you stay into this conversation, because there's some gems here that I think are critical. You know, I had a business coach who said she consistently said this, the root of most problems in our business boil down to our leadership. And she would always say, it's your leadership, it's your leadership, it's your leadership, like whatever was followed by it's your leadership, it's your leadership. And I got it at the time kind of intellectually, and I trusted her with it. But it wasn't until much later that I really began to understand that so much from my relationship and my marriage to my parenting to relationships with my partners and vendors and those kinds of things, all of it came down to leadership, how smoothly it was. So help us to understand, many women on this call feel so overwhelmed. They feel time oppressed in their work and life. Why do you believe that the level of leadership, our presence, our energy, our ways of being, those are things that I've heard you say, why are those essential in freeing up more time, space, and focus to create work we love?
I think, like you said earlier, often we focus on doing, and it's the easiest thing to do, isn't it? I'll just work harder. I'll just do more. I'll just do those extra tasks. And we don't focus enough on how we're being and how we're showing up. And that's what leading yourself looks like. I mean, even if you think about it in the home, I can rush around my house doing lots of tasks. I'm a solo mum to a 4-year-old. But actually, what he needs is for me to sit and be present with him, not
Yeah.
for the kitchen floor to not have any crumbs on it. I need to remember that constantly. That's where I find it most challenging to lead. So how we make other people feel is often not about what we're doing. It's about the presence we bring, the energy we bring to the room, whether people want to be in a room with us, whatever level we're at, or whether we're running our own business or we're working within a corporate. You want people to be in the room with you, to enjoy being in the room with you, and you want to leave them feeling better about themselves and their day than they did before they met you or before they spent that time with you. So I think often I work with a lot of overwhelmed, stressed out people, and I push myself too hard in my business as well. And I think there is that temptation to think, well, just do more. But actually, when we take a step back, when we focus on what's most important and what impact do I want to make, whether through my actions or how I'm showing up, it makes all the difference. So I could share all the strategies in the world with my clients, but if I don't make them feel good about themselves, if they don't come away feeling great, then that's not going to work long term. And I think of our energy as our most precious resource. So I know we're talking about time in this whole series. To me, time is energy. We can't get more time, but actually, in terms of our energy, we have a limited amount of physical, but also mental and emotional energy each day. And we can top that up. Good night's sleep, spending time with loved ones, if they're not being really hard work, exercising, eating well, etc., meditation. But within any given day, we've still only got a certain amount of energy left in our battery. And being really intentional about that, I find a lot of my clients and a lot of women generally expend a lot of that energy worrying about something that's happened in the past, or worrying about something they've got to do later today, or worrying about the what ifs of the future. And then we're not focusing that on the now. So even just asking yourself, is this where I want to focus my attention? Or where could I best focus my attention right now? When you feel yourself overwhelmed, will help to drop the overwhelm, whatever your situation, and help you just get a little bit of clarity and feel good about yourself, because then you're like, yeah, I'm focusing on the right things. I'm doing what I can to stay in control of this situation.
Yeah, I love the point that you make. It's really interesting. I interviewed, for those of you who are listening, there's an interview with Donna McGeorge that's a part of this series as well. So definitely check that one out. But she talks about capacity and our capacity to be able to do more and be more and all that. And she says that the capacity is a function of time, energy, and attention. And so you have validated that and confirmed it as you talk about energy and you talk about where we put our attention, and time just becomes a piece of that sliver. But how we're showing up and our leadership has a lot to do with our ability to show up in the ways that we need to. So I completely see that and concur with it. But what do you see as the biggest challenge for women stepping into the role of leader? Again, whether you hold the title or not, stepping into the role of leader of yourself, first and foremost, because you talk about that, of the workplace, of the household, what are the biggest challenges there?
I think it's something you touched on in your introduction, actually, which is we often don't see ourselves as leaders, and we don't realize that other people are looking to us to be leaders as well. So I think realizing that we have more control than we think we do, and certainly in a work context for managers, that we have authority that perhaps we're not claiming. But for me, so much of being a leader starts with the mental game. It starts with not letting that inner critic get really vocal, and with questioning that imposter syndrome and those imposter feelings when they come up, and going, is that thought actually true? Or is it just keeping me small?
Yeah. It's interesting. You said, I listened to one of your webinars recently, and you talked about wanting to be liked, wanting to be liked in the market, in the workplace, and this kind of the sense of, or this fear of not being liked. And for men, sometimes that's really not an issue. They're like, whatever. For women, that tends to be, a huge deal, and a reason why people shy away from kind of stepping into the spotlight or taking authority and some of those other things. But it reminded me when I was listening to you of a Tony Robbins quote. And I might butcher it, but I'll get the gist of it. He said that, people are driven by two questions: will I be loved, and am I enough? And I think that sometimes our unwillingness to step into leadership, again, in whatever capacity, at home, at work, in business, whatnot, boils down to this fear of, am I going to lose that love? And it could be a tough conversation that you need to have. It could be a negotiation. It could be an ask, a level of support that you might need, and you have to put the ask out there. And there's this fear of that because, well, if I tell my spouse about, this idea, are they going to be behind me? Are they going to support me? Or if I step out here and I have this tough conversation with, somebody I'm leading, are they still going to like me as there's all and so when we talk about being loved, there's all these variations of it. It's being liked, it's being included, it's feeling like the sense of belonging. But the fear of losing that for a lot of women is a big reason why they will shy away from situations where they really need to step up in that leadership. And the other thing that he talked about was this idea of, am I enough? And am I enough meaning, do I deserve what I'm asking for? Who am I to make that demand? Or, there's all these numerous ways I think that, it can show up in our heads. But I've listened to some of your work as well, and you talk a little bit about these angles, but I think there are real kind of internal beliefs that people have and fears that they have, that it's not about the leadership itself or the saying of the thing. It is the fear of, what am I going to lose if I really step up and do this thing? Do you see that in the women that you work with and the women that you speak to? And if so, tell us a little bit more about that, because I think it's a real thing.
It's a massive thing. So my core framework that I work with is called the Influence and Impact Framework. And I developed that by looking at what are the 3 areas that were holding people back. And the first of those is self-doubt. A lot of that self-doubt does come down to that basic human question I think many of us, if not all of us, have of, am I enough? Mm-hmm. And we're constantly trying to seek evidence that we are enough by looking to other people for validation. Mm-hmm. But interestingly, I create my webinars based on what issues people have. And one of them is how to be a respected leader without being any less likable, because that's a real challenge for us as human beings. But as women in the workplace, actually, we can't act like men, much as, it would be really nice. We have to work in their world. But actually, when we act like men, we are judged negatively. So women actually have to be likable in order to succeed. And sometimes we can't see how you can step into the authority or step into that limelight and shine and still be likable, exactly like you said. I have a profile called Likeable Lucy, which basically a lot of the women that come to work with me really resonate with. And it was me when I was earlier on in my career, and it was this idea that you just had to be super nice. You didn't want to set any boundaries or expectations. Delegation was really hard, and you took all the work on yourself because you didn't want to ask anybody else for help or put them out, and you didn't want to say no to anybody. And I talk a lot about how, and this is specific to the leadership world, but I talk a lot about how a lot of women will claim all the responsibility that goes with their job title and not the authority that goes with it. So it's all on our shoulders, but we don't step into the authority to say, actually, please, can you do this? Or you said you do that. Why isn't it done? Instead, we go, oh, all right, never mind. And we do it ourselves and probably don't ask them again.
And we do this, mind you, this is where the time, the focus, and the space issue comes into play. So I want folks to really dial into this. When we fail to step into our leadership, that's where the overload comes from. That's where the burden comes from. That's where all this extra crap comes onto your calendar, onto your plate, onto your to-do list. And it's not because, oh my gosh, you're the only person that can do it. It has everything to do with, have you exercised the leadership to ensure that you're distributing that in an appropriate way? It happens at home. There are times where, there are things in the home that other people in my household can do. And if they're not fired up about doing it, if I feel like I got to pull teeth to get it done, or if I feel like they don't do it well, I'm more inclined to, I'll just do it. I'll just do it. Or you're tired, you've had a hard day, honey, I'll just do it. Well, I'm tired, I've had a hard day too. And so it's important to be able to, those are leadership issues. But then sometimes we don't have the conversation because we don't want to create conflict. We don't want to step on anybody else's toes. We don't want to make them to feel bad, all this kind of stuff. That does not free you up to have the space that you need to really step in and do whatever this next big, move happens to be, whether it's career pivot, whether it's starting, reaching out 10,000 women that you want to impact as your goal or whatever it happens to be. So this is the perfect dovetail, because as you work with so many women, Carla, you cite that there are 3 specific ways that we can level up our leadership. And you started to, step into one of those, and we're going to unpack that one now. But I want you folks to pay attention, because we're going to unpack it, and then we're going to draw a direct line to, what does this mean for your time? What does this mean for the space? What does this mean for the focus that you need to have? And so the first way to up-level your leadership is this idea of stepping into your authority. What exactly does that mean? And how do we use that in our lives?
So my definition of that is about realizing we have a right to ask for what we want and need, whatever that context is. So in a work context, there might be authority to do with your job title if you're a manager or leader, but actually at any level, you still need to be able to do your job well, and people need to give you the resources and the information and the support that you need to do that. So it's realizing that you can ask for what you want and need. I also think it is about not just taking that responsibility, so making sure that you're not doing all the work, but being a bit of a doormat. I don't know if that's a very English phrase, but letting people walk all over you, basically sharing those responsibilities. And I have a tool called the cloak of authority, and I hear people use this with their partners sometimes as well. But for me, it's about when you have to have those difficult conversations. Certainly my experience is that Carla, the person, did not want to have those conversations, because I don't like conflict. I want everyone to like me. Tension makes me feel really uncomfortable. But it was my job to have the conversations. So I would, at the time, Harry Potter films were very big when I created this, so again, a while back. And Harry Potter had a cloak of invisibility that he put on, which made him invisible. And I was like, I could have a cloak of authority that is my job title. So when I need to go and have that conversation, maybe about performance management, or in front of a lot of senior stakeholders, or even for this conversation, the cloak of authority I'm putting on here is actually, I'm an expert in leadership. Now, Carla, the person, does not particularly like being in the spotlight or think she's got the right answer to anything. But actually, my role here is to serve the people that are watching and listening. And to do that, I had to put on my cloak of authority and remind myself that I have useful things to share and that I need to do that. So that cloak of authority, I think you can use that in any context, but people have found that just a really nice visual. It enables you to step into being the person you want to. Perhaps you're sitting up straighter, perhaps you're more open, perhaps you're more confident, or you allow silence rather than rushing to fill all the gaps. I don't know, have you ever used a tool like that? Do you do something like that before you come on to sessions like this?
I think every now and again, I'll pull my alter ego out there, because I'm probably borderline extrovert introvert. So I'm probably 51% extrovert, 49% introvert. I present and operate in an extroverted world just because of the work that I do, but I'm very much like, okay, got enough of people. I get really fueled, by myself. And so there is that, because I'm just not naturally like, so I do have to step into I don't know if she has a name. She just has another persona in order to be able to do that. So it's not my cloak, but it is my cloak. And I totally get it. So, yep, I totally get it. But you said something a little bit earlier, and I want to kind of punctuate that point. You talked about claiming all the responsibility, but not the authority. And I think for so many of the women that are listening in, you're good about responsibility. Like, that's what makes you a high achiever. That's what makes you dependable. And it's something that you pride yourself in, is like, you have integrity with what you're going to deliver. But if you want to get highly paid doing work you love, it's so critical to step into the authority. There's a woman who said, I wish I could remember who said it, and I've quoted it before and still don't know, but she said that we often confuse having it all with having to do it all. And so it's critical that you get this point and figure out, where do I need to have authority here? And we'll talk a little bit more in one of Carla's later points about kind of practically what that means. But for some of you might be good at this in the workplace. Like, you might be really great at kind of managing down and, this and that. But then you find that in the home, you don't do that. You have too much responsibility. And so if you don't step into that, then you begin to be at the mercy of other people's ego trips. So if they're feeling good or not feeling good, you end up holding the bag for that. You end up being at the mercy of other people's personal growth journeys. Like, we're all at different levels in our personal growth. And sometimes our managers are good. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes our spouses are, really evolved, and sometimes they're not. But if you don't step into that authority, you become at the mercy of that. You become at the mercy of other people's priorities. And that's always going to put your dream, your big idea, your mission at the back burner. This is really, really, really key. And when you're having problems of overwhelm, you step back and say, okay, am I taking authority here? And am I not? And what do I need to shift to make that happen? Which leads us to the next point. You talk about communicating with impact so that others listen to you. Tell us more about that and how that impacts the amount of time and space that we're able to create for ourselves.
I think the first point around that is a bit like I said earlier, asking for what we want and what we need from others. So I regularly talk to people who say, I don't feel supported. I don't feel supported by my partner, by my manager. And I'm like, so what support do you need? And they don't know because they haven't thought it through. And have you asked for it? Well, I've asked for support. Yeah, but if you don't know what you need, how are they supposed to know? So I think that there's something there about asking yourself first, actually, what impact do I want to have in this situation? Or what support do I need? What's my intention here? And then making sure that you are really communicating that well. And that you know that you have the right to ask for it, because we are so often, as women, we're trained to put other people's needs before our own. And that point on responsibility, it's not a flaw in women, it's a gender norm. We are trained from a young age to take responsibility. We are praised for taking responsibility and for looking after others' needs in a way that boys, and then as they grow up to be men, are not. They're praised for different things, and that's still going on now. And then in terms of, obviously I talk in a leadership role context, are you providing the people around you with clarity? Are you setting clear expectations? Are you holding people accountable to those? So I have a whole module on delegation, because so many people, they say, well, I tried delegating. I felt bad because I felt like I was giving someone else my work. And then it kept bouncing back to me anyway, and I'd have to chase them. And then they'd say, oh yeah, other things took over. And it's realizing, actually, if you're responsible for what's happening within your area, then you have the authority to ask people to do things. And if they are not doing them, then have the difficult conversation of, okay, well, that was a priority. Why didn't it get done? And to resist that temptation to make them feel better, which is what we always rush in to do, and to just go, oh, I'll solve it myself, and then make it a story that no one else ever does what you ask them to do. Which we all do in every kind of context. Yeah, but that's actually because that's easier than being uncomfortable sometimes and having that conversation. And people aren't mind readers. We think they are, and we also think they know exactly how we want things done, and then we're disappointed when they're not done that way. So I also think this is around setting boundaries. So quite often we don't think that it's nice to set boundaries, but actually what happens is people walk all over our boundaries and we resent them and we silently seethe, or we end up exploding over something completely minor because it's just we're at the end of our tether. And it's Brené Brown who talks about how actually it's not compassionate to not set boundaries and then just get really resentful about it. It's much more compassionate to set those clear boundaries. And when you're talking about time and energy as your most precious resource, those boundaries are really important, aren't they, in all sorts of contexts?
Yeah, I love this point because it validates that the buck stops with us. Like, when our world is kind of all over the place, it's not all this other stuff out here that's the problem. It's a matter of taking stock and saying, okay, what am I not doing, or what do I need to do differently in order to be able to fix this? And so much of what you said around communicating with impact, you have to step into your leadership in order to do that. You have to step into your leadership to have honest conversations with people about what you need. You have to step into your leadership in order to be very clear about what the expectation is, what done looks like, what the deadline happens to be, or when you need this by, or what exactly you want that person to deliver for you. Again, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in your business, whether it's in your household. And oftentimes we are not clear. We're really vague. We're really ambiguous, in part because we're not clear up here, really vague. And we're hoping that you somehow got into our head and just figured out how to symbiotically, connect with us. But there was a speaker in it who wrote a really great book. Can't remember what it was because I want to give her credit. But she talked about, she says, in any situation, don't complain. Don't complain. You make a request. So if you have an issue with someone in your workplace or with someone you're working with or with a partner or spouse, and they're not doing something you need them to do or whatever, we have that tendency to complain about it, whether we're complaining in our head, muttering under our breath, or we're complaining to them. She's like, don't ever complain. Make the request about what you need. So instead of what you got, here's what I needed from you, or here's what I wanted, or here's what I expected from you. Let that be that starting place. That's one way of being able to communicate with impact, and it will save you time. It'll save you time from like ruminating in your head and getting in an unproductive state that ends up ruining half your day because you're mad and pissed off or feeling disappointed or feeling unsupported and all those other feelings that we have that keep us from doing the real work that we need to get done. But it will also create more space, and it will create all the other things that you need to be able to keep moving. But this particularly happens with entrepreneurs. I see it all the time, especially folks who are, starting new businesses and those kinds of things. You have hired somebody to do a service for you, whether it's a website or, to create content for you or whatnot. And then you're afraid to go back to that person when what they send you is not what you wanted, or, oh, I don't like this design, or, oh, this isn't what I had envisioned. And so you're afraid to go, and you're paying the person, and you're usually not paying, you're paying them a lot of money to do something, and yet you're unwilling to communicate. And so what happens is there's this back and forth there, you're talking and dancing around stuff, or in horrible cases, you end up paying them and then you go pay somebody else to go and do it right.
Yeah.
That's wasted time. That's wasted energy. That's wasted space. That's wasted money when you can have the hard conversation, put on your cloak of authority and say, here is what I need from you. And it's funny because it's happening to me right now. I have someone who is redesigning a tool for me, and I'm pretty clear about stuff like I'm pretty clear. I'll bullet point, I want this, and I want this, and then I wanted this. And then here's a screenshot that says exactly what. And then he sends it back to me every time, and it doesn't look like what I said. I'm like, am I unclear? Because I sent a picture of it with a circle around it. And so, but I still have to stand in that space of, no, this is what I want, or this is what I need. No, this right here. And so the level of clarity that you give to the people around you is going to save you eons of time and free up space for you to really be focusing on the right things, which leads us to point number 3, which I think is apropos. You say the third strategy for up-leveling your leadership is focusing your time on the right things. That can sound really broad, but tell us what you mean, because this is a gem of one as well.
I think you can put that in so many different contexts. The first one that comes to mind for me is those times when you say yes when you want to say no. So we often are saying yes to the requests that come to us. And I certainly still have issues with saying a clear no. And you end up saying something vague, and then it all gets very confused. So I think the first thing is, knowing what's important to you. How do you know if something is the right thing? Well, it's about what's important to you, whether it's what's important to you as a person, in your relationship, what's important to you to be able to do your role, what's important for you to be able to make money or to grow your business. So first of all, you've got to do that thinking of what is the right thing. And then you've got to think, well, where else am I spending my time? And what am I saying yes to because I feel uncomfortable saying no? And I see so many people that come to me and say, oh, I said yes to all these things from my team and other departments, and they're all getting done, but actually my manager has pulled me up because I'm not achieving my strategic priorities. I'm not working on my work. Or I see business owners that are saying yes to the clients they don't actually want to work with, and then they've got no time to work with the clients they are excited about. And in a leadership context, I always say there's lots of stressed, overwhelmed managers and leaders, and it's because they're not spending their time in the right way. So I see them spending most of their time being constantly available to their team. And I'm all for being supportive of your team members, but I think we put no boundaries around that. So we're available all the time, and we train people how to treat us. So if they learn that it's much easier to come to us for an answer rather than go and work it out for themselves, they come to us for an answer. If they learn that if they don't want to do a task, they just don't do it and we'll pick it up, they learn that that's a strategy that works. My child learns that he has a tantrum and I don't, and he gets his own way in the end because it's easier. He learns that's a strategy that works. So what I see the difference is in terms of less overwhelmed leaders, so those that are actually just stepping into their leadership, is they're carving out some space for the things that are most important. So yes, they're available to their team, but they're not spoon feeding them the answers. They're empowering their team, and they are having those conversations where when their team comes to them and asks them a question, the first thing they say is, well, what do you think? They don't like it the first few times, but they soon learn that if you're going to ask them that, they might as well work out what they think first, and then they probably don't need your help anyway. And instead, they're spending time on what's important to them and on the other area I focus on a lot, which is influencing. So building those relationships with other stakeholders. I think in the context of running your own business, I certainly know that it's very easy for me to focus on, I don't know, copy for the website or making something look pretty, because it's much harder than going out and doing things like this, you know, things that are slightly outside of your comfort zone, or pitching for a big piece of work, or, you know, I had on my list for ages, be on more podcasts. And I always found great reasons not to do it. I was like, I'll do that next quarter and next quarter. I'll do that when my book is out. And then people are going, why are you waiting till your book is out? Well, because it's an excuse, because it's outside of my comfort zone. So I think there's a whole load of different things in there.
Yeah, I think there's so much meat to unpack there. But the thing that you said in the beginning, I think becomes the core of how you even make decisions around what the right things are. You've got to know what you want. Like, what is the end game? Because the end game will dictate what activities you take on and what activities you don't. And it becomes a decision tree, and it should become a decision tree that's a lot quicker, right? So if you know that your focus right now is to make a career pivot, that you want to move from one, area of focus to another, then everything that you do that's within your control moving forward should lead you in that direction. Everything that's good is not necessarily best for you. And oftentimes we get pulled into activities, we get pulled into roles, we get pulled into task forces because, oh, this person's great, they're a high performer, we want you to weigh in on this. And our ego feels great because we feel needed. But guess what? That's a whole lot of time and energy. And because now you got to deliver over there because you've committed, you got to deliver. But now there's all this pressure around that, and there's no time for the pivot. Entrepreneurs do this all the time. You start this little business, you're all excited about your business, you're the CEO of whatever, and CEO is not chief executive officer, it's chief everything officer. You end up doing everything. You're the billing person and the admin person and the web developer and and then you don't do the things that only you can do, which is the marketing or the getting on podcasts or the client generation, all the stuff that you're supposed to be doing, you're not doing. And so what does that mean for you? It means figure out, based on where I said I wanted to create, what are the key activities that I need to be responsible for? And then everything else I figure out how to get somebody else to do that or how to say no to it. If it doesn't fall into my wheelhouse, it's a no. Or someone, again, and when you're starting out, you may not have money to pay for everything. There's always a way. There's always a way, but you got to figure out how to focus on the right things. Otherwise, it's going to take you way too long to get where you want to go, and you're going to end up burned out, and you're going to end up time oppressed. It's funny as I'm talking about this because I received an inbound request from, she's like a speaker recruiter, her broker or something. Her job is to go out and find speakers for her clients for different things. She's awesome. And so she sent me this request on Sunday, came in on Sunday. And it was like really long. It's like hella long. And so just the length of it, I was like, oh, well, yeah, I don't even know if I want to read this. But she's a client, they're looking for certain speakers for this event that they have, and blah, blah, blah. And I know it's not ideal. Like like my energy was like, oh, this felt heavy, like just reading it. It had nothing to do with her or anything. It's just not the right opportunity for me. It's what I could do. Like I could go in and I could do it well. And there's a part of me that's like, well, you could get paid for that. That's pretty easy. You could do it. But my heart is like, I don't really want to do that, you know. But instead of saying no and no thank you and gracious and I really appreciate it, keep me, you know, in mind for anything else, I have strung this thing all along. And I said, well, you know, maybe I should just take another read because, you know, I could, you know, but it's going to require me to customize some things in ways that I just don't want to do. It's just not as fun. But the deadline's today to submit. And so she's followed up and she's like, I hope you really think about submitting. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure if it's ideal, but you know what? I'll have some bandwidth because I was thinking after our conversation, I was like, I'll have some bandwidth. I'll really take a, you know, read through. I don't need to read through that. Like, I know that it's not the right thing to do. I know that if I say yes, that if I'm selected, I'm actually going to dread every part of this process. I know it. And so I get to decide to focus on the right things, even though it's a really good opportunity. It's not the best opportunity for what we're creating right now. And I think for us, it's hard for us to let go of good to make space for best or to make space for better. And so the whole focus your time on the right things that Carla's talking about, that's what's really true. And so if you're in a business, you might have to train people to do what you need them to do. On your team, you might have to train folks to be independent around decision making. And it might take more time in the beginning, but you're going to get dividends back, right? And so it's put systems in place, all that kind of stuff. It might be hard in the beginning, but that's where you get your time back. And I think for many of us, we're unwilling to do that because it's uncomfortable, but it takes leadership to step into that space and do it. I think these are all amazing points, but it's all about who we be. And it's a lot easier just to go do more of the same, but that is not going to get you where you want to go. And it's not going to give you this breathing space to do it with ease and with flow and with a joy. And to me, success is all about the joy. It's about, this really should be fun. This really should be exciting. This really should be interesting. This really should feel cool. And so I hope that you guys have taken from these because these are such amazing points. Anything else you want to add? I know I've blown my soapbox, but really strongly
there was
about
one sentence that came to mind for me that I have been using myself, and it sounds like it might be a good one for you and the people watching as well, which is just because I can do something doesn't mean I should, or doesn't mean I need to, because I can get really carried away with new ideas, for example. But you know, if I just followed all of those whims, I would be completely overwhelmed. And I have to say that to myself on a daily basis. But it sounds like that's something for you. Yeah, you probably could take that opportunity and be incredible, but that doesn't mean that's the best use of your time.
It's not. I know it. But the issue there is that I knew it on Sunday. It's now Thursday or whatever day it is today. So there's been 4 days where this has been taking up room in my head. That energy, right? That's focus, that's energy, that's space. Whereas if it were off my plate, that energy would have been on a new idea or, you know, whatever else that we're adding to something. And so I want folks to see it. I'm sharing it, you know, openly because we're all work in progress here, right? But I want you to understand that it's the things that are undecided in your life as well that create time. Especially when you know that you know that you know what your right answer is. And usually we know that we know that we know what the right answer is pretty immediately, most times. And so these are things that, you know, steal you from the dream, right? And so that being said, Carla has a free gift for everyone that's listening in. And so I want to give you an opportunity to share that, and then we'll talk about how folks can stay connected to you.
Brilliant. So for those of you that are leaders, although there's some useful stuff in there for any woman, to be honest, I have a free workbook, which is around 3 steps you can take to maximize your impact. And in it, I share some really useful phrases that you can use to make more impact in your communication, as well as some useful exercises and reflections you can do. So I hope that you find it helpful.
Awesome. So again, somewhere on this page, I think it's on the bottom of the page, you will see the link to click on for Carla's work. And when you download that, you'll actually get added to her list as well in her community so that you can follow the work that she does. And again, I think really highly of Carla. I think that, as I mentioned before, it's the humanity in her leadership and how she teaches and trains and coaches on leadership that I find most admirable. And I think wherever you are around the world, it would benefit you. And so it's been my honor, Carla, to have you. Thank you so much for sharing, with our audience. I'm so grateful to you for that. And I think on behalf of Carla and myself, we want to wish you all every success and happiness possible. And we will see you all the next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Okay.